So yeah, I'm Emma. I'm a ward manager at MFT, and in October 2017, I took a 12-month career break. Luckily, my managers can't count, so actually I only came back to work last week, which was great. So I went to Gulu as part of that career break for 4 months, and as Helen said, it's finding the right time to volunteer. It took me about 25 years of working to find that time in my career to get away. And I did a tropical nursing diploma at Liverpool, which was fantastic, and I was absolutely wired then for going abroad. Somehow Helen got wind of this, and periodically she'd send me little emails saying, come and have a chat about Gulu and have a coffee. So it was really important to find out from Helen if I was going to be the right person to go there, and Helen needed to know that about me as well. And to big up the Gulu Man link, it really does have a lot of information that you need to know before you travel, which was really helpful. So all the questions that I needed to know before I went were answered. And even things that I didn't know I needed to know were answered as well. So Helen has a volunteer called Deborah, and between Helen and Deborah, they guided me through the whole process of getting visas and work permits and just smoothed that, all the things you have to do. So I've travelled long haul a lot on my own before, but I've never been to Africa, and it is quite a shock getting there. It's traffic and the driving and the madness and the driving and the driving. It's just a completely different experience than anything I'd had before. So Helen recommended that I stay in Kampala for a few days just to sort out my work permit and gather myself before I went off to Gulu. So that was a really good idea. So you make this 6-hour journey to Gulu in the north of the country, and it really is a flavour of Africa. You leave this very well-developed city of Kampala and then just start to glimpse slums behind the city streets, and then suddenly you're in kind of little towns and markets like the one on the screen there, and then eventually it gets quite rural and you start passing traditional mud huts, which I'd never seen before. My eyes were on stalks, and then suddenly you're passing over the Nile, which is just amazing, and it's so lush and green. It wasn't at all what I imagined. It's a very interesting journey. Whenever you stop anywhere, people try and sell you things through the window. So it might be a pineapple or a bottle of water or dodgy chicken, or even a live chicken for that matter. So as Helen said, Gulu's in the north, and it was a place of civil war, and they had a really horrific time. If you ask anybody about their experiences, they'll have something awful to tell you. It's quite a poor place, and most of the patients that I nursed were so-called peasant farmers. Not my term, but theirs. It's a strange place. It's a mixture of old and new. The picture there is very, very typical, that you have a brick building next to a traditional mud hut, and a lot of the town is like that. These two pictures is almost exactly the same view outside the house where the volunteers stay. They're investing a load in the infrastructure of the town, and the top picture was when I first arrived in October 2017, and the second picture is November 2018, same road, amazing. So I was working on the medical ward at Gulu Regional Referral Hospital, so it's pretty basic. There's no phones, no computers, no call bells, no bleeps. How does that sound? I think the first week I was there, I got a call from the UK asking for a reference for a previous member of staff, and I had to say, well, I'm in a Ugandan hospital, can you not hear the chickens? They have an X-ray department, they have a laboratory, they have an ultrasound scan, but all of these things are quite variable in their availability for people, and it's very limited resources. There's no CT scan in the whole region. So I was on a 53-bedded medical ward, which was a Nightingale, actually I'll go back, a Nightingale layout, and there was one sink on the whole ward. There was 8 nurses on the rota, so they had to cover the whole of everything, from days, nights, weekends, maternity leave, sickness, holidays, everything. They were really, really stretched. Very interesting conditions. We looked after people with malaria, HIV, and all its complications, nephrotic syndrome, sickle cell, all sorts of things. So what was my role? Well, I'm a ward manager, so I was really hoping to work with the ward manager and share ideas and work alongside her. And she was very friendly and pleasant, but she didn't really seem keen on that. So obviously I was mindful. I wasn't going to step in and start making changes. I wouldn't do that. But I think even a peer-to-peer mentoring or a buddy system just wouldn't be something that they would be so familiar with. And I think she wasn't really sure of my motives, to be honest. When I went back a second time, I met another ward manager who was completely different, and she was much more open to working with me and just having a buddy, really. So we had a good moan and we problem solved about difficult staff, and I can truly say it's the same the world over with difficult staff to manage. So I worked a lot with students and staff nurses, just day to day I worked alongside them. So any opportunity for teaching, I'm not a formal teacher, that's not really what I like to do, but anything ad hoc, you might be putting up a blood transfusion and I'd say, so what's the protocol in Gulu for this? And they would say, you're supposed to do X, Y, Z, or we used to do X, Y, Z. And then you can open up a conversation. Oh, okay, so why are you supposed to do observations when the transfusion started, and so on, and start a conversation. It's still teaching. I got the student nurses cleaning. As you can see, my before and after pictures, which I'm quite proud of. They weren't really very keen on doing the cleaning, but the ones that did actually want to get involved, we did a session about asthma while we were cleaning. So we chatted about asthma and I fired questions and answers, and they all got a free UHSM pen. And they really liked that. When the ward was a bit quiet, I got all the staff scrubbing the walls. They were quite motivated, and we just did it all together, and we literally scrubbed the walls from top to bottom. So we just showed the ward a bit of love. But generally, day to day, I was focusing on nursing basics like vital signs and safe medicines administration. So what are the challenges? Well, I found quite a few challenges. The nurses lack any kind of leadership and motivation, really. So care that would be automatic for us in the UK just wasn't there. So people have attendants who are your next of kin. And this is a picture of people's families sitting outside the windows of the ward. And they provide everything, like food, water, bedding. They take the patients, their loved one to the toilet. They do their personal care. So if you haven't got an attendant, you don't get anything. There's a nurses' charity, a UK-based charity that feeds the 15 most vulnerable patients in the hospital every day, but if you're not one of those, you won't get anything. I literally went around the hospital looking for bedding for a 13-year-old child who just appeared in the ward one day and nobody noticed her for 24 hours. And I ended up finding some old curtains that she used as bedding. It was a struggle. There's a lot of absenteeism and fraud associated with falsifying the rota and things like that. Helen was quite rightly strict about us not being there when there was no Ugandan nurses, because it just promotes more absenteeism. So a few times I did actually have to go to the nurse in charge of the hospital and say, there is literally no nurses on the ward. But I'm happy to work, but I'm going to go and work in casualty. There's just a general lack of accountability at every level, really. And things like drug thefts are quite common. So I did my best to be a good role model and give care as best as I could. And hopefully by teaching people, encouraging them, motivating them, you build capacity. So it was frustrating, but it was really rewarding. And as Helen said, the things you bring back are things like emotional resilience and problem solving. And I'm sure that I can do all those in the NHS. So as a volunteer, there's quite a nice downtime in Gulu. It's quite a big town. So there's things like yoga. So that picture shows that it's kind of local people and other volunteers like me. It was a pay what you can class. So it's open to everybody, which was really nice. There's things like pub quizzes, and there's a pool at the local hotel. Lots of food options. You can get pizza, curry, local food. There's everything, really. This is Chobe Lodge, which is in the National Park, which was a beautiful place to see elephants and giraffes and things by the Nile. You can go for a day trip. Kanye West booked out the whole place for a few weeks, a few months ago. And you can also go on safari. Helen probably doesn't want to see me sitting on top of that car there on a mattress. but you can go to the national park and see the elephants and everything. It was really good.
Okay, hello everyone. My name's Dr. Johnny Hook. I'm a geographer from the University of Manchester, so I'm not involved in medicine in any way, shape or form really, but I am quite involved with the Gulu manlink and with Helen, who's been very helpful throughout all the work I've been doing in Gulu. So I'm just going to talk briefly to you about that. And crucially, we've heard a lot about how it can be expensive and difficult and require a lot of planning to help out with these kind of initiatives going out in Uganda and elsewhere in the world. This is the opposite. This is how you can get involved in the project I do and similar ones like it with almost no effort whatsoever. So this is what we'll have a chat about. Okay, so I work on a project dealing with major limb loss in northern Uganda. We've heard a lot about the conflict already, so I won't go in any further detail there. But what I will say is that as you walk around in the area, you become aware of, it's very clear that there's been a lot of mutilation and a lot of violence in the area. You can see it in the people you're walking around. And we've done a prevalence study, the first one of its kind, and demonstrated, we think, somewhere around 2% of the population are missing a leg in this part of the world. So it's a really serious problem. And of course, there isn't very much help and support for people who are having that kind of injury. Most people who are missing a limb or have had other injuries have never had access to any healthcare, and certainly not to things like prosthetics or orthopedic care. And that's what our project is all about. Okay. The reason they don't is that while it is a beautiful place to be, as you can see here, there really isn't very much in the way of infrastructure at all. If you lived in Gulu, then you certainly would have access to the hospital that we've seen from Emma's presentation. But if you're more than walking distance away from there, you're very unlikely to be able to get any help. And that's really crucial, and that's something we're really focused on. So what we tried to do was put together a prevalence study, which we've done. And the key was we wanted to undertake orthopedic care and provision of prosthetics to everyone who needs it, alongside community outreach programs, which will give some education about disability, because people who have lost a limb are typically cast out of their family, and in some cases even killed purely because they're disabled. So we're trying to get away from this situation, provide help to people that have not had them any help at all for their entire lives. And to do this, we came up with this plan. We wanted to have an orthopedic workshop. We wanted 2 orthopedic surgeons, 2 prosthetists to make the limbs, a mobile orthopedic clinic, because we need to be able to take these things out to people. We can't rely on people coming to hospitals, so we need to get out into every single community, and local outreach of events to be able to give some education and change attitudes towards disability. And that left 3 quite important problems, and this is where I really am involved, because I'm a geographer and these are very geographical problems. And we didn't know at the time how many people needed limbs, and we don't quite know at the moment. 2% of the population, we think, is something like 30,000 people. But we're not quite sure, because we don't know how many people are there. We need to find where these people live, and we need to work out how we can get there with our equipment. And these are very, very difficult problems because the area has never been mapped. Okay? And working without a map in any kind of planning is incredibly difficult. You can't make any sort of provision for infrastructure, services, healthcare, or anything without a map. So we started a program alongside all that other work to map the area. And we're doing it using quite a simple system called OpenStreetMap. Has anyone ever heard of OpenStreetMap before? One, excellent. You've been at one of my talks before, haven't you? Yeah. So OpenStreetMap is very much like Google Maps, except it's drawn by volunteers for free. And as a result, the data you create is freely available for absolutely anybody. And we started these activities called hookathons. My students named this. My last name is Hook. And the activities were called mapathons, and they started calling them hookathons, and now it's kind of stuck. I'm trying very hard to get rid of it. But currently you can visit us at hookathon.org and understand about it. Or you might see us traveling around. We go to things like Blue Dot Festival. We've got to schools. We could come to the hospital and do one. There's lots and lots of opportunities to get involved with this because it's very easy to do. If you go to this website, you'll see this. This is the the site. So you go on there and it tells you we're looking for huts, paths and roads. And it gives you an aerial satellite photograph and the map we've got so far. And as you can quite clearly see here, is there anything missing from the map? Yes, there's some things in the bottom corner and some things over to the side. And there's quite a bit there that's missing. And what you do in that case is press the green button and you go in to this editor in OpenStreetMap and you just draw them in. It requires no skill at all, just the web browser. If you can draw a circle, that's all you got, okay? So you go in, and for this illustration, I've drawn, as you can see at the top there, 53 huts. On average, 2 people live in a hut, that's 106 people. 2% of the population are missing a leg, so there could well be 2 people needing a limb that are now on the map that weren't before I made this slide. Okay, that's how powerful this work is. That's how important it is to get people involved. And then you press save, it goes up into OpenStreetMap, and then it's freely available for anyone to access anywhere in the world. And crucially, it also appears on our maps that we then give out in Uganda. And our maps have already been used for the cervical screening program, which is nothing to do with us. They're just using our maps. And for installing broadband internet into over 200 schools and over 20 medical centres just in the Gulu district. So once you get the maps, you can do lots of things, not just medical, not just humanitarian. Lots and lots of different activities can be supported. This is just a team of our volunteers at a music festival. We had a tent. More than 700 people came through that tent and did some mapping. And that's superb. That's exactly the sort of thing that we need. You just grab a laptop, jump on there, give it a go. And any age can do it. The young man there is 6 years old. The lady on the other side is a bit more than 6, but anyone can do it. There is the opportunity for anyone to get involved in this. It requires very little on your part. It's a great way to get involved in international volunteering without actually going anywhere. So in that 6 months while you're planning, this is something you could be doing to get warmed up, to get involved. Okay, this is one of our map sheets that we produce. I took delivery today of an enormous plotter that's going to be running map sheets off constantly. And as the maps update, as people put new data in, hopefully some of you might, that just appears on the maps and they go out to people in Uganda so they can use them for absolutely anything they want, from town planning right through to the delivery of prosthetic limbs. And it's working. It's doing well. This is our first clinic that took place in December. Okay, so this is in a place called Pajule. It's one of the most hard-hit places from the conflict. Helen was out there with us, supporting us on that day. The 2 gentlemen at the front are our 2 surgeons, Sam and Tom. Okay, they're existing orthopedic surgeons who've come to work with us. The people sat down are all missing a limb. This is our off-road vehicle that we've fitted out as a mobile clinic. That's staffed by our 2 prosthetists who trained out in Sri Lanka. We flew them out there to learn how to make prosthetic limbs with low-cost, sustainable techniques. They now drive around in this van following the map production. As people appear on the map, they get served by this with a clinic just like you saw there. They get orthopedic care and they get a limb if their stump can take it. It's really powerful work just for drawing circles on a map. And finally, here's some of the crowd from the hundreds and hundreds of people. Again, Helen was here with us, supporting us on this day as well. This was a theatre-based education day to help people understand how people become disabled through major limb loss and how they shouldn't be treated differently. They shouldn't be cast away. They should be looked after, and they can live perfectly normal lives, work, and so on. So really, that's all I wanted to say. If you'd like to know more, please do contact me. But crucially, if you'd like to have a go, you can go to hookathon.org. It requires no skills at all. You can get kids to do it. You can get anyone to do it. So please do give it a go. Thank you very much.
This is just a little bit about our journey, really, and how we got into volunteering and going over to Gulu. So the initial conversations with Helen and I were sort of in the kitchen upstairs, and Helen approached and said, would you like to go to Gulu and do some training for us? Of which I was quite dubious, but yeah, absolutely, I would love to. And being as the reason we were approached was because we lead on the clinical education and training. So it was to go over and provide, train the trainer on equipment. So Sarah and I, I came back to the team and said, any volunteers, who wants to go? And Sarah straight in with the, yeah, let's do this. So that was kind of how it came about with the conversation. And I think Sarah's going to talk a bit about.
Yeah, okay. So initially then we had discussions about the planning pre-travel. There was areas that myself and Zoe maybe weren't sort of experts in because we'd been given equipment that we maybe needed to train in that we hadn't worked with before. So we spent some time in the maternity department learning a little about infant warmers, spent some time also with in the acute theatres department learning about diathermy, operating tables, just so we had a working knowledge of the equipment. We were also aware that there was Dynamaps that were out there in Gulu that were either working or not fully working, or things like pumps, different Baxter pumps, different IV infusion pumps. So we had we found out about different pumps that we may need to train on as well. And then we also looked at developing a timetable for the period of time we were going to be there. On a personal side, we had to then also organise vaccinations, visas, anti-malarials, and organise a leave planning. And again, just to support with Deborah. Deborah was just like great help at that point as well, all our anxieties, and also Helen as well, sort of within the travel areas. But that was kind of a big issue initially to kind of deal with initially. So arrival at Gulu, we arrived in Kampala at about, I think it was about 10 o'clock at night, wasn't it? So you kind of arrive in darkness and not really knowing where you are and how where you're going. So we spent overnight in Kampala because after reading the risk assessments about not travelling in Gulu at night time, not travelling at night, we were picked up in the morning and on the road journey then to Gulu the next day. We made friends on the journey as well that were quite interested in the cars and the driving. That was when we just kind of crossed over the Nile. The gibbons and the monkeys were jumping all over the car. Again, there was markets that we saw, and then we arrived in Gulu probably about tea time, so it wasn't too late, so we had time to sort of settle and get our orientation to the house and to the area as well. And the roads were great and the drivers were fantastic, because that was one of my anxieties, because I'm not very nervous in the car at all. But everything was fine.
Okay. So, yeah. So when we sort of arrived at Gulu and got settled in at Manchester House, we met some of the team that we'd be working with, and as Sarah said, we already knew the list of equipment that we were to train on, and we did put an agenda together. But also it was some of the challenges we're thinking about. Okay, we're coming to a place we've never taught before. The people that we were teaching were a mixture of student nurses, so interns, they were nurses, there were doctors, they were medical engineers and technicians. There was a real difference in level and understanding and knowledge of people. So not only are you going to a country where English is not necessarily the first language, you're also teaching students with a completely different range of experience and education. So that was a real challenge of how we're going to teach 60 people with varied ability. So a lot of the challenges was about teaching planning, breaking down into groups. So we also had to do the theory, but also how do we know that these people are then going to leave the teaching, being able to practically use the equipment that we've gone over there to train. And as Emma said earlier, there is a lot of equipment over there. However, some of the equipment isn't necessarily used because they don't know how to use it. And it was very quick learning curve for us to think about, so we have policies here and procedures, but over there it's very different. So you might say to someone over here, you need to leave the vital signs or obs monitor plugged in, the Dynamap over here to charge the battery. However, in Gulu, please unplug it, because if we have a power surge, it will blow it up. So it's a bit of a difference there. So that was quite a quick, bit of a steep learning curve, wasn't it? During the afternoon, we also had a chance to have a bit of a tour around the hospital. I don't know whether that made us more nervous about the training, but it was great to go around and see what was going on. So there was a team of us that went over there, and we managed to, with an engineer, sort of work our way around who was going to teach what and practically.
Okay, that's just some other pictures of the teaching. We did one session, which is the top left, which we did on communication. Very, very noisy session, and other teachers that were there were sort of quite concerned, Ugandans, about the level of noise. But that was the whole point of the session. We were doing a communication session about how different people from different backgrounds communicate with each other. That was great fun. And then the dinners that we used to have every day were also great fun. Didn't really know what we were having, what it was, but it was all quite delicious, wasn't it? Yes, it was, yeah. So the girls were there feeding, so just some, so we were really well looked after while we were over there. We didn't have any sort of worries. We had our breakfasts and foods provided for while we were over there as well. Next slide just shows around the hospital, because there was a large group, there was, say, up to, as Zoe said, about 60. One of the sessions we did, one of the days really, was organising workshops around the hospital. So different bits of kit were used around the hospital. So we had the old operating theatres with the lights and the tables. We also had an area where we had the baby warmers and incubators. We had another area where there was the Dynamaps and anaesthetics machines, and that was quite good fun, moving around 15 people, 4 groups of 15 people from session to session, and that's just showing some views around the hospital as well. But it was kind of quite, from my perspective as well, was keeping everybody focused and moving, going to each area, because people just tended to drift and go and have a chat while they were on the way there. So it was kind of come on everybody, you know, come, following everybody. That was quite good fun.
It was certainly challenging, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And these are just some of the pictures that we were getting people involved with the session, so getting everyone to sort of interact. We also did do a theoretical element, so we did some questions, which in retrospect I think would probably have changed slightly. Yeah. But everyone participated, it was great fun, and we had an amazing team that we were over there with. So as an educator going over there, it was so... it really gave you your passion back for teaching, and going over to, they really enjoyed the session. They were enthusiastic. They wanted to be there. They wanted to learn. It really kind of made you appreciate what you have back here. And I wanted to come back to our learners here and say, do you know how much you have here? Because they just appreciated the little things, didn't they, while we were over there. So...
Just some more of the people we met over there. The bottom picture was one of the guys that was in the group, Michael. He was one of the medical engineers in the group that was based at Gulu, and he was involved after having the training on the incubators and the baby warmers. There was one of the incubators was repaired, wasn't it? And it was in use the next day after they'd had the session from the one of the other trainers that was with us, and that got fixed and was back in use. And Michael was just so really helpful throughout the whole of the time, really, very enthusiastic. And this was at the end of the week when they got the certificates presented by the Minister of Health there. So that was a great morning. And then some of the nurses that we met, that they used to be working, then quickly come and have like half an hour session, then go back to work. And that was Nurse Rose, who was lovely. And then some of the children of the staff that were there, and a little girl there, wasn't it? So yeah, I met some lovely people.
And it was quite interesting teaching in a classroom where normally everything over here can be quite formal. However, it was quite normal there that one of the nurses whose child was poorly, and she came from eastern Uganda, came across and was breastfeeding throughout the session and the day, and that was just taken as the norm, wasn't it? So that kind of was quite interesting. It gives you a bit of a fresh, yeah, absolutely, why not? So she's made the effort to come all the way here to teach, and she is going to be taught, you know, there's no going off because my child is poorly. She's bringing her child in and looking after them. But we were very lucky and privileged to have gone over there and had the opportunity to teach. And from those 60 people that we trained, I think at the last count, Helen, there was over 1,200 people in the north and eastern Uganda who have now gone on since our training to train others. So we're really proud of the Gulu Man Link there for the training.